All right, what's up, guys? So it's going to take me a little while, as you saw in the most recent videos, to get everything in 1908 set up back the way that we wanted. I just realized, too, that I'm going to have to go back and redo the lineups, which is not much fun. But anyway, it's okay. We'll make it work. I did want, however, today to talk a little bit about the reason why we have these homebrew discs. It's hard to talk about this. The reason why it's hard is because of the famous He Who Shall Not Be Named, the CEO of Imagine Sports, who came around the 2007-2008 period and basically shut down the old Diamond Mine Baseball community message boards, right? This is a problem because a lot of the old posts that talked about things and a lot of like the history behind what people were thinking, how these seasons were created and all this other stuff is like completely lost. It's lost internet history because this was all stuck on some message board somewhere. Like, I mean, I don't know how you're going to get to it. How are you going to get at it, right? There's no way. There's no way because these message board posts were not archived by like the Internet Archive. It's possible that some people may have saved individual posts, although my memory from the time is that when people would save something, they would usually save something that was like, I don't know, like some sort of experiment that somebody ran or something like that to figure out how the game worked, as opposed to like the actual historical ins and outs of what happened. This, by the way, is one of the reasons why I'm thankful for publications that are now not really around anymore, like the APBA journal, because you can easily look back. There's one place to go look to find out what the community was doing. The problem with these message boards is that if you have some not so good person in charge of them, they can destroy all of the work and all of the discussion you had before, and then you're stuck sitting around looking and saying, you know, where did this stuff come from and why do I have this? Why is it like this? Anyway, so with all of that said, let's go take a look here. So what we have here is on the Diamond Mine Baseball website. This is the link to the Diamond Mine community message boards. You'll notice that there are two boards here. There's the Diamond Mine Baseball discussion and support forum, and then there's also fans of Diamond Mine Baseball. They're both on Tapatalk, and that's because the old forums system was bought out by Tapatalk and whatever. Tapatalk is horrible, right? This is one of the reasons why I try to tell people you really should, if you have a replay, you should probably think about making a blog. There's a lot of free options out there. Sticking it on one of these forums is going to give you nothing but headache. Yeah, there are people who frequent them, though those who go on the forums are becoming older by the day. Young people use Reddit. They don't use Tapatalk, right? Compared to, I mean, Reddit's not perfect. Now, compared to Tapatalk, Reddit is like a breath of fresh air. It's absolutely awesome, right? Although on Reddit, posts can also get lost, and it can be really hard to find posts from like 10 years ago because of other problems with how the system works. None of it works that well. That's why I say have your own blog if you're going to do a replay. Anyway, this is what the Diamond Mine Baseball official message boards looks like. If you look through this, there's not necessarily a whole bunch of posting. If you're looking at what we're interested in, which would be gamer goodies, for example, you're not going to find a whole lot. So there is here, however, look at this. There is a homebrew season repository, but this is, however, a link to what we're going to look at in a second. So no, there is not a special page on here with all of the old homebrew discs that people worked on. Now, the way to find them is you have to go to the real forum, the Fans of Diamond Mine Baseball forum, which is where the actual fans are, and to this day is the more popular of the two. Now, the reason why we created old homebrew discs back in those days is because Tom Tippett, when he was running Diamond Mine Baseball, only had his season disc collection go back to 1927 for reasons, right? I don't know what the reason was. There was this general theory that Diamond Mine was not going to work well with dead ball era seasons. I would argue that if Diamond Mine doesn't work well with dead ball era seasons, it has some problems as a simulation of baseball. I think that the game itself can work with dead ball era seasons, provided that you make sure that the era settings are right. I don't think that they're necessarily right. However, the big problem is the computer manager and the way the computer manager works. As we've already seen, the computer manager has a problem with 1949. You can only imagine what it's going to do with 1908 or 1901 or 1893 or something like that. So what you do here is you go scroll down here over to Gamer Goodies, and it's right here in Homebrew Seasons. And this is where it's at. It's going to be, what we're looking at is the Homebrew Season repository, which is stickied. There's all sorts of other stuff we can look at too. KJOK, who's a good friend of mine, made a supplemental to the all-time greatest players disc. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff here, including a lot of posts that are from several years ago. And there's some people on here who I know, and some people who show up on YouTube. So you can go through and look through that if you want. What we care about, though, is this Homebrew Seasons repository. So when you look through these seasons, you'll see that it goes up through 1926. The reason why is because 1927 was the first season that Diamond Mine had at that time. Since then, Diamond Mine has gone back. They've created 1920 and a couple of these other seasons, and I think that they're going back to make them into deluxe seasons as well. These old versions do exist. APFAS was an old website called A Page for All Seasons, which has been gone for a long time. Some of these old seasons, like the 1919 season, the 1922 season, we're talking about like it's over 20 years ago that people created this, and you can technically use it today, but somebody needs to go through. You need to update it. You need to make sure that the statistics are correct. You need to update it with new stuff that we know that has come from RetroSheet and from Baseball Reference and from sources like that, right? So it would take a lot of work. I mean, even the more recently updated discs like this 2010 1926 disc, you probably would need to go through and clean it up first before actually playing with it. For a while, there was a movement to have all of these seasons not just created, but to have them updated to some sort of deluxe status. In fact, there was talk for a little while about going through old box scores and finding old lineups and trying to dig through old transactions as best as we could to get this set up. Robert Beaufort, who is no longer in the community, is quite well known for this and for trying to spearhead this work. Unfortunately, none of the seasons that he was associated with, 1906, 1907, 1902, and so on, none of these really got off the ground other than the most basic steps of like setting things up so that the players are on the right teams and stuff like that. So there's still a lot of work to be done if we want to do this. There is a question as to whether the juice is really worth the squeeze, right? So if you really want to look at these old, especially dead ball era seasons, there are things I believe that Diamond Mine Baseball could do and that you could do as a season creator to try to make it so that it plays at least reasonably well and so that it's reasonably realistic so you could play through a whole project, right? It's not going to be perfect unless there's some sort of change to the game. The problem is, while Diamond Mine could create discs for dead ball era seasons, the demand's really not there. And that's the thing that really kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. The reason why you'll see Strat-O-Matic come out every once in a blue moon with the dead ball era season is not because they hate the dead ball era or because the game's incompatible, right? There are things you can do. There are things you can do to increase the number of errors and all this other stuff. Now, the reason why they don't come out with more of it is because there's just no demand. Right. And the same thing is true with Diamond Mine Baseball. So you do see some companies that will ignore that fact and just come out with everything so people can geek out and buy it all. But the majority of game companies, especially smaller ones, are going to stay away from the dead ball era. They're going to go for more seasons that are in the 60s. And nowadays, the 70s used to be like the 50s and the 60s, largely to target the baby boomers. So that's because that's where the money is. So that'll help explain a little bit of that. There's a bunch of other stuff here as well. Oh, look, there is a page for all seasons. I'm not even sure if that is still up. Oh, no, look at that, it's not. We could look through that maybe another time and see if we can sort of piece things back together, figure out what once was. And there are other cool things on here as well, including all-time greats, discs, best of the decades and stuff. I'll be honest with you, I played with some of this stuff. It's kind of ho-hum. There are none of these that I would really, really strongly recommend. The ones that I would recommend in terms of all-time great players is the disc from the company, honestly. You have PCL seasons as well. Again, I mean, it's kind of ho-hum. Like, yeah, I'm not sure why this is all listed as Stephen Davis because he's not the one who originally created these discs. I know Stephen. There was another guy who created a lot of these discs here, and I can't remember who it was, but there was a guy who went through and spent a lot of time working on these PCL seasons, not just for Diamond Mine, but I believe also for APBA to create stuff. And then there are also the Japanese discs. I've played with some of these. I think it was 1985 I played around a little bit with. It's all right. These need to be redone. I know Steven's 2007 disc, which is much better. Even then, though, it probably needs to be looked at again and needs to be sort of refigured. So there's a lot of stuff here that you can play around with that the game company doesn't talk about a lot. And it's pretty interesting stuff. I've thought about downloading them all and sort of maintaining my own like backup repository just in case. I mean, it's kind of helpful. The thing that would help the most, though, instead of just having these old files sitting around, would be somebody actually going through them and fixing them up. The problem, again, though, is that you actually have to do research on these seasons, right? You can't just sort of slap it together. It's not going to work to go over to OOTP and copy stuff directly over onto this because OOTP has its own problems, right? So you're just going to make the problem a little bit worse by reinforcing bad things that happened before at the hands of OOTP, which, as I mentioned before, I mean, Diamond Mine Baseball is really the place to go if you want the high quality in terms of transactions, rosters, and so on, because they'll actually do research. There are people who do that. Action PC Baseball and OTP will give you something, but it's not going to be very accurate. We'll talk more about that when we get to those games and when we get to talking about that. Anyway, there you go. That's sort of the history, and that's the reason why we have the Homebrew Season repository. It's actually a pretty cool thing to have, but these are mostly like projects that are like barely even halfway done. If you really want a challenge, I would say go for it. Let's share the wealth together. But I think that there's a lot that needs to be done. I mean, in 1908, there's a lot that needs to be done as well. And we might get into that a little bit. Anyway, we'll keep it at that. I'll talk with you tomorrow. Bye.